Okay, so in this video, now what we're going to do is we're going to factor polynomials. So there's a couple different methods of factoring, and we always have to decide what method we're going to use to factor. In here, we have two terms that are perfect squares that we're taking the difference of. So that means right here we have something called difference of squares. So we have a difference of squares. And when we have a difference of squares, all we have to do is take the square root of each term and put them inside each factor. When we have a difference of squares, the operations inside the factor are opposites, and each of the terms is just a square root of each term. Like the square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 16 is 4. And that is it. That is your answer right there. On the other hand, over here, we actually have two terms. So, but in here, we don't have a difference. So for sure, we're not gonna do difference of squares. We're also not gonna do a difference of cubes because we're taking the sum. Right here, we have two perfect cubes that we're taking the sum of. So right here, we're gonna use the sum of cubes technique to factor. So we have the sum of cubes. We have two perfect cubes, and we use this formula. So the first operation is always the same. Second one is opposite after squaring the a term, multiplying a times b, and then you're going to add b to the power of 2. It's hard to see. All right, like that. So that's a squared minus ab plus b to the power of 2 for your sum of cubes. I'll rewrite it down here so you guys can see it better. So it's the same sign, opposite, always positive, okay? A and b is just a cube root of a cube and b cube. So let's find our a and b over here first. So a is going to be the cube root of x cubed. So the cube root of x cubed is just x, and b is going to be the cube root of 8. Cube root of 8 is 2. That is equals 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, and x times x times x is x cubed. And now all we have to do is just plug it in the formula. So I'm going to add x plus 2. I'm going to square x, like how I square the a here. I'm going to subtract the product of x and 2. So that's just 2x. And I'm going to square the cube root of 8, which is 2. So my answer is x plus 2 times x squared minus 2x plus 4. And that is my answer. So I use the, sum of cubes formula. So it is x plus 2 times x to the power of 2 minus 2x plus 4. Okay. And now the next one right here. This one is different because if you notice, we actually have 4 terms here. So for sure, we're not going to use sum of cubes, difference of squares, difference of cubes, because those you only have 2 terms that are either perfect squares or perfect cubes. But in here we have 4 terms. So what we're going to try to do is grouping. And this is already in standard form, so we can already make our groups with 2 terms each. Let's find the greatest common factor in each term. In each group of terms. So in this group of terms, the greatest common factor is x to the power of 2. And what I'm left with is x plus 4. That's because x to the power of 2 times x is x cubed. X to the power of 2 times 4 is 4x squared. And then my greatest common factor here, my goal is to get a common polynomial, so I'm going to factor out -5. And that is my greatest common factor in these last 2 terms. And I'm left with x plus 4. So look, now I have a common polynomial, so I bring down the common polynomial, which is x plus 4, and then I'm left with x to the power of 2 minus 5. And that is it. And this one we're not going to factor out even more because, like, if this was a perfect square, we could factor it out a little more with the difference of squares. But 5 is not a perfect square, so we're just going to leave it like that. Okay? And that one is factoring by grouping. So what we did was grouping. All right? And now this last one, well, this one we're not going to do grouping because we don't have 4 terms here. We only have 3 terms. We're not going to, you know, do difference of squares because yes, I have a square term, but I don't have just 2 terms. I have 3 terms. And I'm not even going to think about sum or difference of cubes because I don't have any cubic terms. But something I do notice is I do have a greatest common factor right here, which is 4. So I'm going to pull out the 4. I'm going to factor out the 4, and I'm going to be left with x squared minus 3x plus 2 inside my parentheses. So I have 2 factors so far. But you also have to think to yourself, if you can factor this quadratic factor just a little more, how we're going to try to do that is because since, you know, that is in standard form, we are going to try to factor it using the Xbox method. So to use the Xbox method, we're going to list our A, our B, and our C that are inside the factor. A is the coefficient of the squared term, B is the coefficient of the linear term, C is a constant term. So C is 2, we're only paying to the terms inside the parentheses. A is 1, B is -3. So I'm going to put out my X and my box. A times C goes up here, B goes down here. 1 times 2 is 2, B is -3. And then what I'm left with in here, so I need to find 2 numbers that multiply to 2 and add up to -3. So in here, -2 and -1 are going to work out because -2 times -1 is 2. -2 plus -1 is -3, so that works. And I'm going to start doing my factoring. So I start putting my squared term on the top left corner. So that's a square term inside the parentheses because I'm only factoring what's inside the parentheses. And then I'm going to put my constant term down on the bottom right corner. And then this -3x got split into 2 terms in here. So, and these are the coefficients of the 2 linear terms that are going to go inside the box. So we're going to have -2x here, and then we're going to have -1x. That's because -2x plus -1x add up to -3x. And now we're ready to factor. So the greatest common factor in this column is x. The greatest common factor in this column is -1. The greatest common factor in this row is just x. And the greatest common factor in this row is -2. And let's see if that works. X times x is x squared. X times -1 is -1x. X times -2 is -2x. -1 times -2 is +2. So yes, that goes win-win. So that totally works. So my factors in here are x minus 1 times x minus 2. And don't forget we factored out a 4 earlier. So I'm going to bring down the 4, and that is my final answer.